I live in a 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor. Usually my roommate is home, though she sometimes stays over at one of her guy friends' places. Recently, on a night she was out, I was smoking a cigarette on her screened-in porch. There's a solid wall around the porch a little over waist height, so while I was getting down, I couldn't see the ground outside. However, this changed when I stood up to go inside. As I closed the sliding glass door, I looked back out of habit. About 50 feet away, a man was standing in the parking lot, looking directly up at my apartment. At me. Actually, I recognized him. He lived in the complex. For the most part, he was normal looking. Mid-20s, straight black hair just above his shoulders, generic outfit, but it was the way he acted. He was always wandering aimlessly, sometimes down the middle of the road, or muttering gibberish to himself. It seemed like he was aware of other people on some level, but was trying to ignore them, almost like he didn't trust they were real. Up until then, though, he seemed mostly harmless, but that went out the window when he locked his eyes onto my apartment. I closed the blinds, then sat down on the couch and went back to the TV show I was watching. Still, I had this nagging feeling. I kept trying to ignore it, but about a half an hour later, I finally peeked outside. My heart sank when I saw he was still out there, even closer than before. Starting to freak out, I called my roommate on FaceTime. When she answered, she was drunk and in bed with her guy friend. I told her what was happening, but she wasn't taking it seriously. I decided to risk it and go back onto the porch so I could flip the camera around and show her. But when I stepped out, the man was gone. My roommate said I told you so, like I was just overreacting. I didn't appreciate that, but I was relieved. I figured even a crazy person had to have gotten bored after standing in the same spot for the better part of an hour. My roommate hung up. Then I went to the kitchen to make myself some herbal tea so I could calm my nerves. The kitchen is by the front door, which is on the opposite side of the apartment from the porch. I was pouring the boiling water over the bag of tea when I heard something that almost made me jump out of my skin. The door handle was rattling. Someone was trying to get through the door. I rushed over to make triple sure it was locked. Then I looked outside and saw that same guy on the other side. He had a completely glazed look in his eye, just a hollow, empty face. But it was terrifying. Almost as soon as I saw him, it was like he could sense me, because he stopped trying the handle and looked directly through the peephole back at me. It was like he was staring into my soul. Afraid for my life, I ran back from the door and called the police. I don't know what the man did right after that, but of course, by the time the cop showed up, he was gone. As I talked with the cop, he also tried to play it off, saying the man might have been drunk and confused about which apartment was his, but eventually figured it out. I hated that there were two people telling me I was overreacting, but I had to stay calm. The cop left, saying he'd circle the complex to see if he saw anyone suspicious, though he never came back. After a little while, I called my roommate again to update her and ask if she could come home. She didn't want to, though, so I hit up a friend of mine and begged her to sleep over. Thankfully, she agreed, but until she arrived, I was posted up on the couch, wide awake, with all the blinds closed and the lights turned off. It must have been 20 minutes later when I started to hear more strange noises. I couldn't tell what was making it. It was like the sound of a squirrel crawling across the screen, 10 times louder. Finally, I looked through the blinds covering the sliding door and saw my worst nightmare. The man was punching through the screen and crawling onto the porch. I screamed in panic. Just as he got over the wall, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a rock. I knew he was going to try and break through the glass, so I ran away out the front door and started screaming at the top of my lungs for help. I sprinted across the breezeway and raced down the steps, hoping my neighbors would look outside. But then I saw my friend's car pulling up to me. I rushed into the passenger seat and told her to drive out of the complex while I called the police again. We waited across the street until we saw cops pulling into the complex and followed them. When we returned to my apartment, it turned out the man never managed to get in. There was still a gaping hole in the porch screen and a giant crack in the sliding glass door. But he gave up before smashing it and jumped back down to ground level. Exactly how he managed to scale my downstairs neighbor's porch to get up to mine is still a feat of insanity I can't comprehend. Thankfully, one of my neighbors saw him running back into another apartment, so the cops were able to finally knock on their door and arrest him. He wasn't an official resident, but he'd been staying with a relative who lived here after being kicked out of his previous place. As the man suffered severe mental health issues that had been unchecked for years. When I pressed charges, he entered a plea deal that had him sent to a mental hospital instead of a prison. I figured that's for the best, but I still have absolutely no idea what he wanted from me. I'm just glad my friend showed up when she did, or he might have chased after me. Ever since that night, I don't just dislike being home alone. It terrifies me.